everybody. When you're a competitor like him, he wants to contribute. A million ways to contribute to this football team, and I'm all to be perfect. I'd love to be perfect. I'd love my family to be perfect. It's just learning lessons for everyone. I don't think he's got any bad intentions. I don't think he's got a bad bone in his body, but once you put it out there, it's out there.
So the New York Jets are outperforming everyone's expectations. I mean, they are really starting to establish an identity for themselves, but at the same time, they seem to have a bit of a problem. Now, the significance of that problem is really up for your own interpretation. I'm just here to give you guys the news, and you guys can tell me what you think about this problem yourself. So before we get to the content, we announced $100 cash prize winners to any subscriber that turns on our notifications on this channel. We announce it every single week, with the most recent winner being Nathan Weber that I announced in the Bailey Zappi video. Now that we get all that out of the way, break! Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? Look, guys, I'm gonna be honest. For all New York Jets fans here, when the Jets brought in head coach Robert Saleh from the San Francisco 49ers, I didn't expect this team to be an offensive monster or an offensive juggernaut. Although I really did believe that the pieces were in place and they did have the potential to become a good offensive team. You're talking about a team that has multiple second-round picks that are wide receivers, in addition to a team that recently went out and signed Corey Davis to a gigantic contract as well. And then on top of that, if that wasn't enough for you guys, they went ahead and spent a first-round draft pick on Garrett Wilson this past year. So this is a team that is very deep at the wide receiver position, but that's before you realize that they also drafted Zach Wilson with the number 2 overall pick in the NFL draft last year. They also selected Elijah Vera Tucker in the first round last year. They originally had a stud tackle in Mekhi Becton, but they inevitably had to go out and get Dwayne Brown to protect him, to replace him. And this past year, they also went ahead and drafted Breece Hall to complement Michael Carter. So the pieces are in place for the New York Jets to succeed offensively. I mean, you would at least hope that was the case. The reality is that the New York Jets are a fantastic defensive team. I mean, they're pretty freaking good defensively. Carl Lawson is healthy this year as opposed to last year where he was out for the season for an injury. They brought in a former number 3 overall pick in Solomon Thomas. Quentin Williams is finally coming into his own. They have veteran linebackers like Quan Alexander and CJ Mosley. And I think most importantly, they crushed their draft pick with selecting Sauce Gardner this past year in the NFL draft. It was a fantastic pick. It seems like this is a man that brings swagger to the New York Jets defense. I mean, just look at this video of him rocking a cheese head after beating the Green Bay Packers at Lambeau Field. Side note, here's something I also realized just looking at the depth chart. Sauce Gardner's backup is Michael Carter II, and his third stringer is Bryce Hall. And their running backs are Breece Hall and Michael Carter. I just thought that was really funny, but I digress. You might be thinking, okay, Mike, what's the problem? Why are you making this video? To remind us how great the Jets are doing? No! I see your comments requesting other videos on teams other than the Bills, Chiefs, Dallas Cowboys, Philadelphia Eagles, Deshaun Watson, Aaron Rodgers, and Tom Brady, and Russell Wilson.
I read your comments.
And in this case, it seems like the New York Jets have a very unique problem. You see, they did select Zach Wilson with the number 2 overall pick in last year's NFL draft. Zach Wilson had a very rough rookie campaign. I mean, he threw for 9 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, completed 55% of his passes, had a QBR of a 28.2, but was also sacked 44 times. Now, he sustained an injury for the beginning of this past year, but it's not like the New York Jets are winning games because of Zach Wilson. While Trevor Lawrence has clearly improved as a player and a quarterback as a result of, I don't know, not having the most dysfunctional head coach in NFL history coaching him, Zach Wilson, at least in the small sample size that we've seen so far, hasn't necessarily won games for the New York Jets, but he hasn't really necessarily lost games for them either, or it's the fact that the New York Jets are that freaking good. Now, bear in mind, Zach Wilson's only played in 3 games so far, and throughout his entire career, he's played 16 games thus far. It's kind of too early for us to automatically say,
Zach Wilson's a gigantic draft bust.
But just because we're willing to practice patience with Zach Wilson doesn't necessarily mean that his teammates are willing to practice the same exact patience. A player that isn't willing to be patient with his current situation all the way back in August is none other than Denzel Mims. Now, if you don't know who Denzel Mims is, he is a former second-round pick in the 2020 NFL Draft. Now, around August, Denzel Mims actually demanded a trade from the New York Jets. And here's why. According to his agent, this is how he feels about his situation. It's just time. Denzel tried in good faith, but it's clear that he does not have a future with the Jets. Denzel vowed to come back better than ever this season and worked extremely hard in the offseason to make that happen. Still, he has been given no opportunities with the starting offense to get in a groove with them. Now, bear in mind, this was requested during preseason. Okay, this was like 2 months ago at this point. At the time, he said that we feel at this point a trade is our only option, since the Jets have told us repeatedly they will not release him. Joe Douglas has always done right by Denzel, and we trust he will do everything in his power to find another team where Denzel can be a contributor. Now, it's pretty funny because this article also mentions that New York has consistently thrown draft pick darts at the receiver board in the last 3 drafts. First spending a second-round pick on Mims in 2020, then spending a second-round selection on Elijah Moore in 2021. Finally, the Jets upped the ante in 2022 using a first-round choice on Ohio State product Garrett Wilson. When combined with New York's decision to sign former first-round pick Corey Davis to a 3-year, $37.5 million deal in 2021, the Jets simply don't have room in their top 3 spots at receiver for Mims to prove that he's worth their time. Denzel Mims so far hasn't played in any games. He's been inactive for every single game thus far. Now, what's interesting about this is, despite the Jets winning and finding success based upon their defense and their great running so far, it seems like Denzel Mims isn't the only individual that's upset about his current situation. If you remember a couple days ago, after a fantastic win against the Green Bay Packers, who, yes, they're not performing as well this year, but at the same time, it's still pretty impressive that you're able to beat Aaron Rodgers, even though his offensive line is terrible and he doesn't really have weapons at the wide receiver position. Regardless, the Jets were still able to win 27-10, partially because of their great defense and their fantastic work on special teams. But Elijah Moore then posted some cryptic messages on Twitter. Now, he deleted these messages, but here's what he said. The first was, God, I need direction. Then the second was, love my teammates. And then, God makes no mistakes. I trust you through it all. And then following the victory against the Packers, he said, if I say what I really want to say, I'll be the selfish guy. We're winning. Grateful. Huge blessing. All I ever wanted. Bittersweet for me, but I'll be solid. So I'll just stay quiet. Just know I don't understand either. I support all of my teammates 100% too. They know what it is. I'm behind them like no other. Everyone rocking out needs to keep rocking out. That's part of why we're winning. Don't get it confused either. Now, when Robert Saleh was asked about these tweets, this is what he said about the situation.
We've had conversation. He's fine. You know, he's a competitive young man. Like everybody, when you're a competitor like him, he wants to contribute. And sometimes we could think that our contributions are from production only, when your contributions can come from a variety of different things in terms of the way you show up to the building, the way you lead, the way you communicate with your teammates, the effort that you put on the field. There's a million ways to contribute to this football team, and he's a competitor, and all he wants to do is contribute. And so I've got no problem with Elijah. He's one of our high character individuals, love him to death, and eventually the production part of it that he's hoping for will come. He's just continue to work, you know. So I don't think he's got a bad bone in his body, but once you put it out there, it's out there. So,
and for the most part, I assumed that Elijah Moore was going to, I guess, take the high road in this situation because, well, the Jets are winning. This is the most success they've had in quite some time. You're a team player, am I not right? After all, we always come on this channel and roast Russell Wilson for chasing individual accolades over team success. This is a little different because you have to understand Elijah Moore is in a situation where he's just fighting to get snaps at this point. He's really just trying to prove that, hey, I'm not a trash wide receiver. I'm actually pretty damn good at my job. But the issue is with Zach Wilson not necessarily throwing for over 300 passing yards per game, and who knows, for all you know, maybe someday he does. And the fact that he's not being targeted, it seems like Elijah Moore and Denzel Denzel Mims have once again reached a breaking point because according to Ian Rappaport, sources, Jets wide receiver Elijah Moore, frustrated with his role and usage, has asked for a trade. The team has no plans at all whatsoever to trade him. The former second rounder was targeted once in the win over the Packers, but the play was negated by a penalty. Dude, I bet you that Aaron Rodgers and Justin Fields would love Denzel Mims or Elijah Moore on their team. Now, here's where it's a little interesting. According to PFF Nathan Jenke, it probably doesn't help that Elijah Moore has seen the Jets draft Denzel Mims in the second round the year before, and Mims has 8 receptions his sophomore year and inactive throughout his third year. He doesn't want to go down that same path. It's interesting because currently it does look like Elijah Moore is going down that same path, although to a lesser extent. Up until this point, throughout 6 games, he's been targeted 29 times, 16 receptions, 203 passing yards. And for the most part, man, he averages like 4 targets per game ever since Zach Wilson has returned. I mean, in week 1, 2, and 3, when Joe Flacco was the quarterback, he was targeted 7, 5, and 9 times throughout the first 3 weeks of the season. The strange part is that he came out with the same amount of production throughout all of those 3 weeks, and then in his first week with Zach Wilson as quarterback, it's for the most part more or less the same type of production. So I could understand his concern, because you have to understand, if Elijah Moore and Denzel Mims are not getting targets, then when they hit free agency, people are going to think they're bad receivers, which could have a gigantic impact on their career. Now, what's interesting to me is at this point, you would think Denzel Mims is going to say, yes, this is my opportunity to shine. Because according to Rich Cimini, Moore's behavior today pre-trade request didn't sit well with the New York Jets. Wouldn't be surprised if he's inactive on Sunday. Denzel Mims, who has been practicing at the X spot, which is Moore's position, could get his shot. Well, that would be nice, and you would think that Denzel Mims will be playing the role of, hey, I'm just gonna put my head down and do my best to contribute to this team. Denzel Mims actually mentioned that, hey, I still feel the same way. According to Rich Cimini, Moore becomes the second Jets wide receiver to request a trade. By chance, I happened to be talking to Denzel Mims today, who told me, my trade request is still on the table. He wasn't bitter though. Mims actually was upbeat despite being inactive every game. Mims is a little bit more professional about the current situation, whereas it seems like Elijah Moore is, well, just a little concerned. I can understand the concern. If you're looking at Denzel Mims, who was a second round pick as well, and you're watching him just completely wither away to the point where the Jets aren't playing him at all, and you were the second round pick 1 year later that plays the same position as him, and Denzel Mims is practicing in your spot, yeah, I'd be concerned and demand a trade too. The reality of the situation is you're still developing your quarterback. Now, I don't really know the type of offense the Jets are going to be running in the long run. I mean, they have Mike LaFleur, which is Matt LaFleur's brother. So immediately I'm thinking Matt LaFleur really loves zone running schemes. So I'm assuming that this is going to be an offense where Zach Wilson isn't going to be dropping back to pass very much, which means wide receivers may not be getting involved very much. But if that's the case, why are the Jets spending so much draft capital on wide receivers? I've said this multiple times. You don't have to be some sort of football genius or binge watch a bunch of Brett Coleman's videos. Well, no, do that. It'll make you know the sport of football way more. But you don't need to be some sort of football genius that studies film all the time in order to know the simple concept of, if you have a really good defense, you want to run the ball more, they can control the clock, and that way the other team doesn't have as many opportunities on offense, and your defense could suffocate them a little bit more, which will result in wins. It's a tried and true method of winning games. Hell, it's the reason why the Seahawks traded Russell Wilson. Pete Carroll wanted to run the ball more and depend on his good defense so they could win games. That's why they won a Super Bowl and came within inches of another Super Bowl. But at the same time, if that's the philosophy, why get a quarterback with a huge arm and multiple wide receivers? Zach Wilson was getting Patrick Mahomes comparisons coming out of college. I know everyone automatically wants to find the next Patrick Mahomes, but that's what he was being compared to based upon his arm strength. Why would you get a quarterback that could throw the ball that deep, but you're not necessarily utilizing him to that level? Why would you consistently spend draft capital on wide receivers if you want to depend on your defense more and run the ball more? It's an interesting question. I could understand where all of these receivers are coming from, and I could understand why they're demanding a trade. Maybe you have the answer. Let me know in the comments section down below. Regardless, I'm happy that the Jets are having success. This is a very unique problem to have. Hopefully they do right by their wide receivers and at least trade one of them. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.